Esports, a global industry quickly gaining mainstream attention. Although esports takes advantage of new media platforms such as Twitch.tv and alternatives like YouTube Gaming, Africa TV in Korea, and Douyu in China, this video will mainly be looking at the complications that arise when the video game is both a platform for professional esports leagues and also a product being marketed for the mass casual audience. To begin, we can look at a quote from page 6 of Ryan Rogers' book, Understanding Esports, an Introduction to the Global Phenomenon, published in 2019. Quote, "At its core, esports builds upon gaming. Gaming is a modern vernacular shorthand for the electronic form of interactive entertainment known as video games. Gaming communities are founded upon a game title, produced by a studio or independent developer. The game must have a competitive element, whether fostered by the development team or community itself, in which players can compare their skills to the skills of others." End quote. As you can see, there's a few highlighted elements that I would like to draw from this quote for further analysis in relation to video games as a platform. First off, we see the need for developer support in both producing the video game itself and also a conscious effort in creating the esports scene. Secondly, esports must require an element of skill expression, of which players can easily compare their own skill to the skills of others.
I'm like, even though I only have a bat on the floor, I think he's in the bed. Oh, Faker may be in trouble here. Deathmark tries to clean it up for Ryu. Oh, look at the cleanse, look at the moves. Faker, what was that?
Rogers later gives a comparative example of both a developer-curated esports scene and a community-driven esports scene, citing Riot Games as an example of hands-on developer involvement, and Nintendo as an example of a more hands-off approach. Well, relatively speaking, but I digress. Evidently, even just at the logistical level, video game developers have a lot to say in how esports scenes are organized. This is further emphasized by the second point regarding skill expression. So, skill expression is directly a result of game design and game balance, both of which are developer driven, but also swayed by community and public opinion. However, this community and public is made up of both the casual majority that play video games for fun and high-ranking professional players that make up the top percentile of mechanical skill, team coordination, and game sense. This directly ties into a quote from page 25 of Jose van Dijk, Martin de Waal, and Thomas Pohl's book, The Platform Society. Quote, "Whose interests does a platform's activity serve? Which values are at stake? Who benefits?" End quote. Furthermore, game developers not only have to balance between the dichotomy of pro versus casual, but are also tasked with balancing for proper viewership experience that draws and keeps eyes on the broadcasts. Here is Greg Street of Riot Games on the balancing philosophies of League of Legends at the 2017 Game Developer Conference.
Now, we do focus on a target. We aspire to balance for all players, but being able to focus helps us avoid insanity. And this is particularly relevant because we patch the game very frequently and don't always have a lot of time in between patches. Players will assume that you should and do balance for high elo. Only. That's the important thing to a lot of players. They don't necessarily understand why you're making changes that will help out less experienced players. But this would remove a lot of the 130 champions from those players. We do have to constantly reinforce the goals of balance to all within the community. I'll watch prominent streamers discussing the state of balance in League, and they're always talking about, oh, well, now the pros are going to pick this or that. Why, what is Riot thinking here? A lot of this stuff is publishing. And by publishing, I mean the community, the messaging you're sending to your communities to make sure they understand what your goals are and why you're making the wacky changes to the game that you're making. Now, interestingly, pro balance itself is largely about viewers. We don't want to make life terrible for our pros, obviously, but when we make a change, it's often with the idea of our viewers having a fun time watching League of Legends. We will make changes if, for example, the game gets a little stale and viewers are saying, yeah, it's still fun to see the end game, but I skipped the first 20 minutes because it's really boring. That might lead us to make a change. In this case, balance could be fine, but we just think that, we're gonna hurt our virtuous cycle of viewing and playing and viewing if people start tuning out of esports.
As a result of game balance, you come out with a meta. According to Benjamin Scholl's master thesis on ethnography of early Canadian varsity esports, meta is defined as, quote, a community source best practice or what most competitive gamers are using, end quote. So, what we learned is meta is defined by the community based off of the balance changes that the developers made. Developers are the ones that change the meta in order to properly balance the game for competitive integrity for professional esports, the player experience for casuals, and also the spectator experience. But sometimes finding the middle ground between these three aspects is quite hard, and game developers drop the ball. This may result in negative casual experience, negative pro experience, and a negative spectator experience. For example, Season 2 of the Overwatch League was defined by a team composition known as GOATs, named after the amateur team that popularized the strategy. Without going on a tangent discussing the history and details of GOATs, I can briefly explain why the composition was significant. GOATs consisted of 3 tanks and 3 supports. This contrasted the Season 1 meta of Dive. Dive, on the other hand, was characterized by high mechanical outplay by damaged characters, while GOATs essentially rendered the DPS role, the role that usually plays damaged characters, useless. So, DPS players that could not adapt were simply out of a job or benched. As a result, DPS players could not showcase their mechanical talent because of the meta.
As you're about to see with the Infrasight and nailed the shots, not many Widowmakers would go for this play.
Yeah, but Pinewood,
And he just absolutely nails it here. Even to the machine gun, what a flick!
Are
And
you
another one,
serious?
beautiful!
this guy's a living highlight reel, man.
Ironically enough, GOATs was directly a result of the Overwatch development team introducing Brigida, a character meant to shake up the dominant Season 1 dive meta. GOATs wasn't very well received by both the pros.
We live in a society, chat,
My
phone fell, where people and pro players scrim this meta probably 6 to 8 hours a day. Think about it. Think about how their brain, chat, this is your brain on GOATs. Go, 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 go! I would actually love to see pro comms on stage for this match. It'd be so funny.
Nor the spectators.
We'll just close it out. 3-0 victory for NY.
So the second fastest attack on Anubis, a record currently held, I believe, by the Vancouver Titans, just 3 seconds faster. And it was the delay we saw from the Excelsior here around this position that actually led them to get that setup, that attack, that come through, split the Outlaws up, win that fight without ultimates. We do see the Outlaws are going to pull out Dante's Tracer. This has been some of the things that Outlaws fans have been waiting for is a good Tracer player on Houston. It's Jake on the far. This combo's worked well for them before, but as soon as they see the defensive setup, they will just simply swap it away. Crucial time lost here for the Outlaws.
I'm just letting the fans give their, the fans here in the studio give their opinion.
Well, you know, you want your team to win, right? They're going to have to play what's meta.
With this example, we can draw upon the hypothesis of Juho Hamari and Max Hwelblom's research journal. What is esports and why do people watch it? In this research journal, it details the 7th hypothesis in that they believe that a large portion of the esports spectator base also plays the game that they watch. Therefore, they have the proper game knowledge to appreciate the skills shown at the professional level. A similar situation also happened in Season 9 of League of Legends, in which the meta required a specific role to play a set of characters foreign to the players that have played that role for years. Essentially, it's like taking a forward in hockey and putting him in the goalie position. Although that forward has watched and played with many goalies throughout their career, the skills that they learned while playing as a forward does not directly translate into being a good goalie. Similar to the Overwatch example, this is another situation in which a pro player could not fully display their talents due to the meta. As a result, the skills that were desired a few months ago are now suddenly not desired. Here is a clip from the League of Legends podcast The Dive, discussing the possible problems that arise from this type of meta.
From many different ways, and now this is something that you're actually going to get rewarded for. It's very scary for a lot of the pro players though, because the ones that can't adapt like that or feel uncomfortable on the other champions, like your job is at stake, kind of your livelihood is at stake, and if something like this lasts a long time, then maybe you actually end up having to worry about getting replaced or something like that.
So, what did we learn about video games as a platform in the context of esports? Well, we learned that video game developers have to take into consideration the many voices that desire to take the game into various different ways. Tying this back to the Van Dyke concept of whose interest does a platform's activity serve, which values are at stake, and who benefits. We can see that game developers hold a certain power when it comes to choosing whose values get represented in game balance. Here is a clip from the Rainbow Six Siege podcast Logic Bomb podcast, discussing the feelings of a divide between the balanced priorities of a pro versus that of a casual player.
A lot of people are under the impression that Ubisoft is only balancing the game around the competitive scene, and it's just what was the tweet? Red Bull addicts. I remember seeing a tweet like that. It's just like Ubisoft is catering to these Red Bull addicts, these pro Red Bull addicts, and I was just kind of like, well, when you have an instance in which the competitive scene has more trials to work with in terms of especially gadget placements, because that's a very static thing, and there's so much static stuff on defense. There's not a lot of static stuff on attack. Like, how much stuff can you really place on attack, right? I guess Gridlock, Nomad.
Yeah, but
yeah.
I mean, it's so flawed to start with, because like just unironically saying that it's only balanced for competitive, like just think about it. Like, the casual community makes up 99.9% of the.
I wish it was.
Of course, they're focused
selfishly
on the casual player base, right? And the pros are saying that no one listens to them. The casuals are saying that no one listens.
Who's right?
Maybe
someone has to be right.
Make what they think is right. Yeah, maybe the devs just make what they think are right, and then people will claim it as theirs or made for them.
Yeah.
Whenever it suits them, and it's for the other ones whenever it doesn't, right?
These cases should be lessons moving forward, detailing the constant fragile state that esports games exist in. Even with the introduction of franchise leagues to ensure team and player security, changes made in game balance still ultimately decide what kind of teams and individuals are favored to win, and which ones are caught playing catch-up. At the end of the day, esports is still growing in popularity and relevance. Moving forward, balancing healthy innovation and meta with constant stability, all within the context of the professional, casual, and spectator experience, will be key in the longevity of both the esports scene and the video games that serve as the foundation to this very industry.